Here we are back with more exciting questions and answers from our Hebrew scholar, Nehemiah Gordon. Nehemiah, I have a question here. It says, do women still need to follow the laws of nidah, menstruation? I would like to correct that. Do women and men still need to follow the laws? And is it okay to have marital relations on a high Sabbath?
Okay, so we're going to have an adult conversation now. So if you've got children in the room who aren't ready for this, you need to send them out for the next 10 minutes. We're going to have this is Torah, so we're talking Torah questions here. Yep. So first of all, let me deal with the second question. Is it okay to have marital relations on a high Shabbat? There is no commandment anywhere in the Torah that would indicate that it's forbidden to have relations on Shabbat. That's just utter nonsense. If I had more time, I'd go into why some people mistakenly think that. It's just utterly ridiculous. I want to deal with the first question.
Hallelujah.
Okay.
Thank you, Jesus.
Okay. For the first question, though, is really an important one. If you believe the Torah was not done away with, if you believe Yeshua when he said, I've come not to do away with one jot or one tittle, not do away with the Torah, then you should take what the Torah says seriously.
And not add or subtract.
Not add or subtract.
The foundation there.
Right. And then I just want to quickly bring up Ezekiel chapter 18, verse 6. It really, read the whole passage in Ezekiel 18. We don't have time to go on the whole thing. But there it talks about what it is to be an ethical person. And it lists some of the key things there. And it's surprising the things it mentions. Idolatry. Don't commit idolatry. Don't commit adultery. Don't take advantage of the poor. Clothe the hungry and etc., those kinds of things. And one of the things there, it says a woman during her nidah, which we'll define in a minute, don't have sex with her. Like it's right there. That's one of the key things that when Ezekiel is summarizing what the Torah is about, that's in there. You could also make the argument that in Acts 21, where it talks about sexual immorality, that is also one of the four key things that they were relating to the Gentiles in keeping the Torah. Because that is in...
And also the Gentiles abstaining from blood.
Right. Okay, well, that's eating blood when you slaughter an animal. But specifically, the sexual immorality there, that is, we know what those are from Leviticus 18 and Leviticus 20. Let's look at Leviticus 18 and 20. Those are actually prohibitions. Leviticus 18:19, it says, and thou shalt not, I'm going to use the King James.
Okay.
Because you can still figure it out from the King James. And thou shalt not approach a woman to uncover her nakedness as long as she is put apart for her uncleanness. Now the word there in Hebrew is nidah. You don't know how long she's put away for her uncleanness or what that even means until you go to Leviticus 15, which we'll get to in a minute. Leviticus 20, verse 18, if a man shall lie with a woman having her sickness, and that's just a mistranslation, it's having her period. These were Elizabethans or whatever these guys were. They couldn't have a mature conversation about these things. We're going to have it. She's having her menstruation and shall uncover her nakedness. He has discovered her fountain, that is the source of her flow, and he has uncovered the fountain of her blood, and both of them shall be cut off from among their people. This is kind of a pretty serious thing. Long story short, don't have sex with a woman during her nidah. What is the definition of nidah? We get that from Leviticus 15. From the time the woman first sees a flowing of blood of her menstruation, you count 7 days. Why am I saying this and emphasizing this? The rabbis have made one of these takanot. Say takanot. That's what I talk about in my book, The Hebrew Yeshua versus the Greek Jesus, and in the Raiders of the Lost book series. They create takanot, these man-made rules and regulations, and one of their takanot is that rather than counting 7 days from when the woman first sees blood, they say count 7 bloodless days. That's a very big difference if you are a woman of childbearing age. That could be as long as possibly 12 days or more. That's not takanot number 1. Takanot number 2 the rabbis invented is, it's not just a flow of blood like we see in Leviticus 15, it's any spotting. And because of that, there are actually women in Israel who cannot conceive because they have some spot of blood, and then they've got to count 7 bloodless days of not just of a flow, but of spotting. And a woman knows when she's flowing. She knows. But if you count any spotting, and in the Talmud it says a spot even the size of a mustard seed. I mean, we're talking about OCD stuff here. We're talking about to the point where literally ultra-Orthodox Jewish women, I'm not making this up, Michael, they'll bring their underwear to the rabbi to ask the rabbi, and we're having a very adult conversation here. They ask the rabbi, is this just a regular discharge or is this menstrual blood? And the rabbi has to study what this is. and look at the color and the texture. I mean, it's incredible stuff. They actually do this, and they consider this a very righteous thing to do. And what they end up doing is there are women who can't conceive because they're under this ban. Now, that is the prohibition of having sex with a woman during the 7 days of her nidah, beginning with the flowing of her blood. That is a prohibition. What we're not prohibited is the rest of the things in Leviticus 15, and that's really important. I was meeting with these folks about a month ago, Michael, and they sat me down and they said, we've got a really important question that we're struggling with, this small community. And they explained that when the man has sex with his wife, he's not allowed to hug his children. And when the woman's during her nidah, her menstruation period, she's not allowed to hold her children. I said, what are you guys talking about? So what happened is they read Leviticus, and I've heard this many times, so I'm not blaming them. You wouldn't believe how many times I've heard this from people who are new to Torah and don't understand Leviticus 15 in its context.
Yeah,
so
taking it out of context. And this is why I've asked you this
is
question.
Key stuff, Michael. Mm-hmm. So Leviticus 15 has a whole bunch of rules about how you become ritually unclean, what we call in Hebrew tameh. You sit in the chair of the woman who was menstruating, all kinds of different things, you become tameh. There's no prohibition to become ritually unclean. If I sit in the chair of the woman, I become ritually unclean until evening, that's actually not a problem. There's no prohibition to become unclean. And the flip side is there's no prohibition or no requirement to remain ritually clean. This is what Yeshua is referring to when he gives the parable of the Good Samaritan. You have these priests who are coming from the temple and they see a man who's sick. They say, what if he dies on us? Then we'll become ritually unclean. Well, that's not a prohibition, number one. And number two, the only thing you'll be prevented from doing is eating the sacred things in the temple. So you'll go without lunch. You're saving a man's life. That's the point there in his account. Leviticus 15:31 is the key verse in this whole story. It ends all of these rules and regulations of Leviticus 15 with, thus shall you separate the children of Israel from their uncleanness, that they die not in their uncleanness when they defile my tabernacle that is among them. All of the rules in Leviticus 15 are about one thing. Don't go to the tabernacle after you sat in the chair that your wife sat on when she was menstruating. Don't go to the tabernacle after you had sex with your wife before washing in water and waiting till evening. If you're living in your house in the Galilee and you're not going to the temple that day, or even if you're in Jerusalem and you're not going to the temple that day, then the rest of Leviticus 15 is completely irrelevant for your daily life. The only application of Leviticus 15 is it defines that 7-day period that comes in, no pun intended, that comes in today into play in Leviticus 18 and 20. Don't have sex with a woman during nidah. Other than that, the rest of it is completely irrelevant for your daily life as long as you're not going to the temple. And if you are going to the temple, anyway, you've got to wash yourself in water and wait for yourself to be purified. That's why they found dozens of mikvahs at the entrance of the temple, because nobody could walk around in a daily life, and even in the ancient world, let alone in the modern world, and not become ritually unclean. You're going to rub against someone or touch against someone. You know, I just bump shoulders with somebody, and I could become ritually unclean. That's why just before I walk into the tabernacle, I immerse myself in the mikvah, and I come out, and I wait till sunset, and I'm clean.
Now, I have to say that there are some congregations that are prohibiting women from coming to their congregation because of this very thing, as if their congregation is the temple. This is the modern Phariseeism.
Oh, Yehovah, have mercy.
It's absolutely ridiculous to treat this like it is the tabernacle or the temple. They're not going to die. There's, as he said, there's no prohibition against becoming ritually unclean. And certainly, we're not going to be going to the temple anytime
and
soon.
Can I say one really controversial thing about those congregations, whoever they are, that prohibit women who are menstruating from going into the synagogue? That actually comes from the influence of certain Sephardic Jews who were in turn influenced by Islam, because a woman menstruating isn't allowed to go into the mosque. That's not from the Torah. There's no synagogues in the Torah. The only thing you're prohibited from doing is walking into the tabernacle if you're ritually unclean. Other than that, go about your daily life and worship the creator of the universe.
So, unless you're going into a messianic mosque, you're not prohibited, okay? And if they're treating this place like a mosque, then run as fast as you can. So thanks, Nehemiah. We've got more. Be back next week.